In this video I want to talk about writing opinion editorials or op-eds in whether it's a local newspaper, a national magazine or newspaper, it could be on a blog or other ways of communicating, local community newspapers, etc. Before I get to that, I just want to talk briefly about the role of the media in policymaking. Certainly we live in a media age and it's becoming a multimedia age with the rise of the internet and social media. It seems to be an explosion of different ways that information and misinformation flashes around the globe and around communities very quickly. Getting tougher perhaps to determine quickly how solid the information is or how reliable, and so that really calls upon the importance of exercising judgment and not believing everything you hear the first time you hear it, particularly if it sounds incredible. There's no doubt that the role of the media, they play a major part in the policymaking process and in the politics of a given community, whether it's the dissemination of news or information, which is the traditional, rather neutral or innocent view of journalism, to whether they help set agendas, draw attention to certain issues, trivialize some things, perhaps inflame passions over others, shape the agendas and the daily spin around politicians and the debates that may go on in the House of Commons in Ottawa or in local legislative assemblies. But there's no doubt the media has some kind of impact on policy, even though it's often hotly debated how much of an impact they have and whether that impact overall is for good or for bad. But that's the stuff of the debate around the politics of news and journalism and media studies. I want to talk today very practically about writing opinion editorials or opinion pieces for your local newspaper or magazines or other news sources. Depending on the place you want to submit this, they usually have instructions or guidance on the length they'd like to have, and the kind of tone and topics they may prefer to have in the paper. Typically the length may be only 600 to 800 words, so one of the key things about writing an opinion piece or an op-ed is having the skill of being concise and precise. To do that, you really got to decide first and foremost what the central argument or central message is you really want to get across in an op-ed. Why are you being motivated, or why do you feel you ought to have an opinion, and who would be interested in your opinion? And as an author of an op-ed, it may come from politicians, community groups, experts, policy specialists, just so-called ordinary citizens who may feel strongly about a local issue. It could be a very current event, it could be something that's been a long-standing dispute, but it needs to be concise, it needs to be readable. You need to avoid jargon, particularly if you want to reach out to a mass audience of a daily newspaper or a local community paper. So accessibility in your language and clarity of your language, precision in the writing to get something across in the 700 or 800 words. It needs to be credible as well. If you're not just writing to the editorial board or to the local readers of that paper, but if you're hoping that your audience for the op-ed are some decision makers and policy makers, opinion leaders, perhaps even other journalists who may pick up the idea of your story, you need to make sure the story has credibility. That means it has to be informed by some research and background. You may cite some studies or information in the opinion piece. Often people do not cite specifically. There's no footnotes or a bibliography to an op-ed typically, but you need to convey to the reader that you have a solid handle on the topic, and perhaps a few clear, specific, brief examples peppered through this short piece will quickly convince the reader that you've got an opinion, but you've got an informed opinion about this issue. So you very quickly have to kind of grab the reader's attention, and that's what being readable is about, but also being topical. Why are you writing this now? Why would the paper want to publish this in their space for the op-ed? A lot of papers get dozens and dozens of submissions, and they can only select a handful each week that may go into that opinion piece in their opposite their main editorial page. So what is it that makes this newsworthy? Is there a local angle? Is there a recent crisis? Is there a recent event or a decision? A change in government, a cabinet shuffle, a throne speech, budget decisions, a recent tragedy, something that's gone on in another province that raises questions about your own community or your own province. There has to be a hook. There has to be a reason why this is newsworthy and timely and should be of some interest to the readers of that particular publication. So credibility, timelessness, newsworthy, some evidence-based materials, and also that there's some feasibility. Credibility is one thing, but meaning it's rooted in some research and evidence, but feasibility suggests that if you're wanting to write an op-ed with the purpose of having a policy solution or some recommendation, or you want to endorse a particular proposal or reform that's been put forward by other groups, when you get to that part of the op-ed, which is the latter part of the 700 words around policy solution, it needs to be cast in a context of feasibility. So pay attention to the party in power, who are the decision makers, what kinds of ideas, concerns, priorities, how do they tend to frame issues, what's the language they use or the discourse. So how do you nestle your analysis and your recommended policy solution into that context so that it won't be dismissed out of hand as pie in the sky or we can't afford it, or just challenges so much the fundamental views or values and the language of the people in power that it will be dismissed out of hand. So making a decision to write an op-ed, you've made in a sense some other prior decisions about to what extent you're going to write something that's got some compromises in it, perhaps some tactical approach, some calculation, some strategic thinking, but also having to write it in a very readable way. So for a lot of academics, it's a challenging way to get your ideas across. It also may be a challenge for local community groups, but it can be an invaluable way to get some opinion out into a broad readership and circulation, and often can have a ripple effect by being picked up by other media and by other policy groups and decision makers. So opinion editorials or op-eds are still a viable and important technique of communicating and using the media to influence the way issues get discussed and what kind of policy solutions get debated in your own political community. So thank you very much.